People like to call this a miracle tape or something of that nature, but it's really not a total miracle. It's just a very technologically advanced product. You're also going to hear people advertising this as being a very strong adhesive. Technically, it's not an adhesive, and I'll get into that at the end of this video if you care to listen to it. We're just more interested in exploring how it works and what it does and what it can do for you. Here we have our little demo drywall section. What we're going to do is chop off a little piece of this with scissors, just like this. Cuts rather easily. Now we're going to stick it onto our drywall, just like this. Now we're going to remove the protective covering. You can't see it very well, but the tape is actually stuck right to the drywall here. So we're going to put something on it just to see how that works. And you can see that is holding it to the wall rather well. In fact, you can put a lot of pressure on this, like I'm doing here, and it really doesn't want to come off. It's going to stay there. Now, if I want to remove this, I just pull it directly off, like that. It comes right off. Now, on the other hand, if I push down on it, like this, from the top down, it takes a lot of force to try to separate it. In fact, it's almost impossible to do. The reason for that is because of the nature of this bond, which, because I don't want to bore you now, I'll explain the second half of this video if you feel like listening to it. Okay, a couple of things. You've probably heard advertisements on this as gecko tape and things of that nature, and it's miracle and it has all kinds of great things. Well, those are claims, and you really have to use a little discretion and common sense when you're evaluating how you're going to use this. One of the things you need to consider is not just the surface you're applying it to, but how that surface is applied to whatever that's applied to. In other words, if you have a painted wall, the connection between the nanotape and the paint can be very solid and very stable. However, if the connection between the paint and the surface the paint has been applied to is not as strong as the bond between the nanotape and the paint, what's going to happen is not going to make you very happy, because when you peel the nanotape away, you're probably going to pull some of the paint with it. In other words, if you have a wall, this happens to be bare drywall, that has primer properly applied, and then you have paint that's properly applied to the primer, and therefore you have a good bond between the primer and the drywall and the paint and the primer, you should be able to apply the nanotape and pull it off many times without having any issues whatsoever. Okay, consideration number 2, if you go on YouTube and you take a look at a lot of videos, you're going to see people using small pieces of this tape to hold up bricks and God knows what else. Please keep in mind that the ability of the nano tape to support anything is basically a function of the amount of tape that you use versus the size and weight of what you're applying. In other words, it's probably a pretty good idea to use copious amounts of tape to attach anything to a wall surface. Here we have Tech Teams number 909, 30 millimeter wide by 3 meter long nano tape. Nano tape and that type of connective material is commonly called gecko tape. That reference to the gecko is not made because anybody's trying to sell you insurance. The reason marketers like to call it gecko tape, per se, is that it uses the same technology a gecko uses to cling to just about any surface, climb on any surface, even upside down. The key is the way the bottom of the gecko's foot pad is configured and constructed. What makes these things sticky is something called vertically aligned carbon nanotube technology. What that means is that a polymer, which you can see in the tape here or on these hooks, for example, has been developed that emulates the soles of the little guy's feet. And this technology is non-chemical. In other words, it's not epoxy. It's not something that actually sticks like glue and then hardens. It's something completely different. It's actually mechanical in nature, in that these vertically aligned carbon nanotubes, these nanotubes are microscopically small. And what that means is that they can reach into the space between the molecules, whatever surface it is you're attaching the nanotape to. And since this is non-chemical, not adhesive, no epoxy or anything like that, there is no residue, nor is there any chemical smell. This explains why the shear strength, in other words, pushing down on the item when it's attached to a wall, is extremely strong. These little nanotubes are intertwined between the molecules of whatever the surface is. However, when you want to take something off the wall and you pull it directly off, it disengages rather easily. Since this is a non-chemical process, it's also easy to understand why the nanotape can be washed clean and then reapplied to a surface.